When talking about North Korea's nuclear issue, the question people ask most often is, will North Korea actually use nuclear weapons? But that's the wrong question. Do Americans sit around debating whether Russia will use nuclear weapons? Do Indians try to guess whether Pakistan will use theirs? If an enemy has nuclear weapons, you should assume they will use them and prepare accordingly. Making preparations based on whether you personally think they will or won't use them is a mistake.
People who talk about the possibility of North Korea using nuclear weapons usually have a wishful thinking that North Korea would never use nukes against South Korea because both sides are the same Korean people. They want to hear the answer, no, North Korea won't use them. In fact, many South Korean progressives insist North Korea only built nuclear weapons for defensive purposes and therefore has no intention of actually using them. Some even say Kim Jong-un himself said he would not use a nuclear weapon to South Korea and trust his statements completely. As a result, they neglect preparations for the possibility of North Korean nuclear use. Ironically, this kind of wishful thinking and poor preparation actually raises the chances that North Korea will use nuclear weapons. Among all the nuclear-armed states in the world today, North Korea has the lowest threshold for using nuclear weapons. The officially recognized nuclear powers, the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France, have already announced no first-use principles. But North Korea, like Pakistan, refuses to adopt such a policy. North Korea regularly talks about when and how it will use nuclear weapons, far more than any other country. At the Workers' Party meeting in December 2023, Kim Jong-un even said openly that he would attack and absorb South Korea using nuclear weapons if necessary. North Korea went even further in 2022 when it passed its nuclear policy law, spelling out 5 situations in which it could use nuclear weapons. If a nuclear or other weapons of mass destruction (WMD) attack against North Korea has occurred or is imminent. If a nuclear or non-nuclear attack against the North Korean state or leadership has occurred or is imminent. If a deadly attack on major strategic facilities has occurred or imminent. If stopping a war from expanding or dragging on requires nuclear use. If a catastrophic crisis forces the use of nuclear weapons. Look closely at 2 and 3. North Korea says it can use nuclear weapons even if a conventional, non-nuclear attack on its leadership or strategic facilities is just imminent. If North Korea can use nuclear weapons whenever it feels a threat is approaching, then Kim Jong-un can basically decide to use nuclear weapons at any time. And remember, North Korea is a hereditary dictatorship where all power is concentrated in Kim Jong-un alone. If he decides to launch nuclear weapons, they launch. Because the top leader is treated like a sacred figure, no one around him can freely give advice unless he asks for it. There are no institutions to check or restrain him. For that reason, North Korea's likelihood of using nuclear weapons is objectively higher than that of any other country. South Korea and the United States must prepare for the assumption that North Korea will use nuclear weapons. Some scholars in South Korea and the United States insist that Kim Jong-un would never use nuclear weapons because he knows the U.S. would massively retaliate, threatening both North Korea's survival and his own personal safety. They treat Kim Jong-un as a perfectly rational actor. But to be a rational actor, a decision-maker must have all the necessary information, fully understand the pros and cons of each option, and then choose the best one. Kim Jong-un leads the most isolated country in the world. There is no way he has access to all the information he needs for perfect decision-making. His environment does not allow people to freely give him diverse information. It is also unlikely that he can evaluate all the available options as accurately as a superhuman, or that he receives thorough, independent advice from people with such ability. On the contrary, Kim Jong-un is more likely to behave irrationally than the leaders of other countries. Therefore, the rationality that South Korean progressives rely on is far from assured. Meanwhile, North Korea's strategic situation for nuclear use has been getting better each year, which increases its likelihood of using nuclear weapons. With the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, North Korea has significantly reduced U.S.'s confidence in being able to retaliate with nuclear force. As the credibility of U.S. nuclear retaliation decreases, the likelihood of North Korean nuclear use increases. South Korean retaliation is also not a major concern for North Korea. South Korea does not possess nuclear weapons, and its political leaders have recently been consumed with internal power struggles, neglecting national security, especially the North Korean nuclear threat. South Korea today resembles a naive deer that fails to notice a lion creeping up right behind it. From Kim Jong-un's perspective, it may look increasingly feasible to conquer and unify the peninsula, and if he decides to attack South Korea, of course he will use nuclear weapons. Once war starts and he is already the bad guy, he has no incentive to hold back nukes to appear less bad. That's unrealistic. In fact, a 2021 report by RAND and the ASEAN Institute estimated that North Korea would use 40 to 60 nuclear weapons at the very start of a war. And ever since it developed operational nuclear weapons in 2013, North Korea has had a 7-day war plan, the essence of which is to conquer South Korea within 7 days using nuclear weapons. People who rely on wishful thinking refuse to admit it, but North Korea built nuclear weapons to attack and annex South Korea, to achieve a Korea unified under Pyongyang's control. If that is the purpose, then of course North Korea will use nuclear weapons if it sees a real opportunity. Debating whether North Korea will or won't use nukes is like a deer, after spotting a lion, wasting time wondering whether the lion intends to attack instead of running or preparing to defend itself. For more analysis on this topic, see Chapter 3 of the author's book, Nuclear North Korea: Armed, Desperate, and Unpredictable. If you'd like to hear more related content, please click the subscribe button.